Now, on November the 13th of 2015, France's national football stadium, cafes, restaurants and a concert hall were targeted in a night that many will never forget, especially those who lived through it. For the survivors of the Paris attacks, it's been a particularly painful and long road to recovery. Our correspondent Annelise Borges met with Catherine Bertrand, who was at the Bataclan on that fateful night.
J'ai pas compris tout de suite ce qui se passait. Au début, au tout début, j'ai pensé que c'était une blague.
It was Friday night, and Catherine was out partying in one of her favorite concert halls in Paris, where she was caught in unprecedented violence.
J'étais dans le mode, il y a des pétards, c'est un enregistrement. C'est une blague. À partir du moment où j'ai vu les gens tomber les uns sur les autres, j'étais dans un mode de sidération.
3 attackers armed with Kalashnikovs and wearing suicide vests had entered the Bataclan concert hall, determined to carry out a massacre.
Oui, j'ai eu peur de mourir. Mais bizarrement, j'ai pas eu peur de mourir dedans. J'ai eu peur de mourir dehors. Les gens qui étaient dans la sortie de secours, qui étaient coincés dans la cage d'escalier avec moi, ne sortaient pas. Parce que ça tirait dans la rue. Et dans la rue, il y avait un bain de sang.
Across Paris, a series of coordinated attacks that Friday night left 130 dead and more than 300 wounded. The targets: football lovers, concert goers, people celebrating the end of a working week, people living their lives. 3 years on, Catherine is still reeling from what happened. As part of her healing process, she published a book, Chronicles of a Survivor, a depiction of her life's new chapter.
Pour moi, une survivante ou un survivant, c'est quelqu'un qui se bat pour vivre et c'est de trouver un compromis pour être le mieux possible avec sa nouvelle vie. Parce qu'on a plus ou moins tous changé de vie dans l'histoire.
Like Catherine and other survivors, France also changed as a consequence of the Paris attacks. But also like Catherine, the country's determination not to let what happened define it seems overwhelmingly stronger than the terror that struck 3 years ago. Annelise Borges in Paris for Euronews.
Well, Annelise joins us now live from Paris. Good morning, Annelise. How is Paris going to be remembering this day?
Good morning, Belle. Well, today, families, survivors and the families of the victims will gather for anniversary commemorations at each of the Paris attacks sites. Starting at 9 p.m., they will gather in front of France's national football stadium in Saint-Denis, where those attacks started 3 years ago. And then they will go to each one of the cafes and restaurants and come here to the Bataclan concert hall, where 90 people were killed. France's President Emmanuel Macron will not be attending the commemorations, nor will France's former president François Hollande. And the local elected officials that are going to be present have been asked not to deliver any speeches and not to give this event a political tone. The idea really is to pay homage to those 130 people killed 3 years ago.
And of course, Annelise, security has been stepped up since those attacks. Just describe to us what it's like to live in France at the moment.
Well, we're certainly past that wave of terror attacks that saw nearly 250 people killed in the space of 2 years. Of course, we all remember it all started with Charlie Hebdo in January 2015. Then there were the November attacks. Then there was Nice. This was a country that was in shock, and it still is scarred by the level of violence. However, authorities now say they are much better prepared. Judicially, and even financially to tackle the threat of terrorism. They say that intelligence agencies here in France have prevented half a dozen attacks this year. There were, of course, 2 attacks, one in the south of the country that saw 4 people killed back in March, and one here in Paris in May this year that killed 1 person. But authorities say they do not believe in a large-scale coordinated attacks like the ones we saw happen 3 years ago. They are, of course, quite concerned with lone wolves, with individuals that could perpetrate that kind of violence. But this is nonetheless a much safer country, if one can say it like that. But of course, for the victims and for the families, this still is a very painful day to remember those who have fallen 3 years ago.